the point is surrounding yourself with people that actually want the best for you and that you also can look up to and that you admire and respect. And at the end of the day, not comparing your chapter 1 to someone else's
Right.
chapter 10. Like, I didn't think, oh my gosh, Joe has more money than me. I'm like, I'm starting with what I can afford and what I have. And I never looked back from that point. And then that
Okay.
started with me explaining this stuff on platforms to other people. So don't be afraid of just starting with what you have. I know everybody's like, oh, get to this amount of Bitcoin, get to this amount of net worth. Literally just put your head down, surround yourself with good people, trust God, keep God first at all, because God could take
Yes.
all of that away from you. Like, I don't give a crap how much Bitcoin you have. Like it doesn't matter at the end of the day. You can't take it with you. So like, just be a good person, because the
Yeah.
system that we live in is trained to make people think they have to rush to get more. Like, live in the moment, be present, and just be a good steward of what you're blessed with. And then
Yeah.
I believe you will be blessed more abundantly.
All right, everyone. Welcome back to the Moon with the Lunas podcast. Today, we have a really great guest. But before that, today's Bitcoin price is 70,600. He's the founder and CEO of SimpMe, a platform focused on simplifying complex ideas through creativity, product development, and powerful analogies that actually stick. He's built out courses and training curriculums that help curious learners level up their understanding in a real way. On top of that, he's a product manager at Splunk Technologies, working on data solutions for Fortune 100 companies, and he's also contributed to innovative startups like Buoy Health, helping scale their product capabilities. He studied finance and entrepreneurship at Villanova, and he's earned his MBA from NYU Stern. So he brings both the academic and real world perspective. Jordan, we are so excited to have you here. Welcome to the show.
Let's go.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all for the warm introduction. That's just happy to be here, as I told you guys offline. Super excited. Love what you all are building in terms of giving people a space to share their insights and expertise. So super happy to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, man, I am super fired up. I've been following you now for a little bit, and I know you hop on Bitcoin Spaces on there with
Mhm.
your crew, and so everything that you do is super valuable, and that's why we are super excited to have you here today. And just to kick things off a little bit, how did you first get introduced to Bitcoin?
Yeah. So ironically enough, my introduction to Bitcoin was back when I was in college. So I graduated college, undergrad at least, in 2015. um I think it was around 2014. My fiance, at the time she was my girlfriend, she was the first one. Her name is Renee. She was the first one to mention Bitcoin. Ironically enough, like most people, they just like thought it was a scam initially. So, she came to me and she was like, "Hey, Jordan, there's this really cool thing called Bitcoin. I was watching this video on YouTube and you can send money peer to peer." And my first inclination, just from my background studying finance and working in the field, I was like, "Yeah, no, I don't know. That sounds weird. I don't know. That sounds like a scam. I don't think that it's anything like that's gonna really like mean anything." And pretty much like her background is in healthcare medicine, so she had no understanding of it, but she understood the problem, right? And she understood why it was valuable without having to know everything about the financial system. So that was the first introduction that I got to Bitcoin. And then I had some friends in college that were really deep into gold, and some that were into Bitcoin, and they kept telling me the problem, which I'm sure we'll go into. And
Yes.
that's kind of like what kept sparking my insight about it. So that's kind of like a little bit of background on when I first got introduced to it. But I think for me, I only do things as I learn and as I've studied it before I make the decision. So it kind of gives me a better appreciation of what I'm trying to like dive into. So
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And it's kind of crazy because you studied finance too, right? So it was almost like everything like you're like, no, like this ain't it. Like I know I've done my work on this, right? And so
yeah.
and for her to just be like, hey, there's a problem here, whether it's like investment vehicles, all these vehicles that we have, and you're like
Mhm.
in the trenches, like studying it in school, and it's like basically like almost like misleading you a little bit, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so it's just so funny how like that how it works with that, like somebody who barely knows anything about, monetary, and then you're just like, I'm in here studying and it's like, I'm sorry, babe, I love you, but you're wrong, but
Yeah.
literally she was right.
You're so
And
right.
I was going to add something because, when you're in school, you're kind of getting indoctrinated into a system, and so
Mhm.
you're getting what they want you to learn, what they want you to understand.
Mhm.
And it has to sometimes take those outside eyes to go, hey, there's something that's been mentioned here.
Mhm.
Oh, yeah, maybe there is something else. And I think having an open mind, being open minded enough,
Yeah.
is also, kudos to you. You were like, that is true. Maybe there is something else out there.
Yeah.
No, and like to that point, like I think, with school and at least from my experience when I was at Villanova undergrad, and at NYU too, right? Like one of the classes that was formidable for me during my learning at at Villanova was this fixed income class that I took my sophomore year. And I feel like out of all the classes that I took, like understanding the stock market, understanding equity markets, understanding that stuff is for the headlines, right? Like everybody
Yes.
gets excited. Like when everybody tours Villanova for the business school, they'll show you the Bloomberg terminals. They'll show you like all the stuff about like just the stocks, right? My best class that I ever experienced was fixed income. And a lot of my friends, we talk about it to this day. Like we all appreciate that class because the bond market is what props up the system. The debt is what props up the system. And I know that's something that we'll probably talk about, right? Like as in terms of the solution for the problems that we see in this world, that fixed income class opened my eyes to the system. So even when Renee mentioned it to me, I kind of was hearing her. I just didn't know much about it. But as other friends started saying stuff too about gold and what they were doing, and some of my friends, like I said, one of my best friends, he had been buying gold and doing that since we were freshmen. So he kept explaining the problem. Like he doesn't own anything other than like gold and Bitcoin. And he's been doing that for a long time. But the point is like his background and what he experienced and where he came from, where he's from, his family, he's from Africa. So his perspective was totally different on financial systems. So to your point, Danielle, right, about like some of the stuff being indoctrinated the way they're teaching it from the curriculum, that class stood out to me a lot. There were other classes that were great, but that was a great class because we went through the whole financial crisis, like from the beginning to what happened to AIG to all that stuff. And then that's what kind of got me sparked like, hey, printing money isn't good. Interest rates, the way they're shooting them down isn't good. And that was kind of like my real like crash course into the denominator and like the whole issue, the problems that we see, right? Like with debt.
That's so good, Jordan. And then also, so I know the denominator matters, right? That's everything goes back to the denominator matters. I know we have a lot of listeners on here that don't quite know what that means.
Mm,
They're like, what are you talking about? And
mhm,
please, it's on your shirt. You preach it in everything that you do. And
mhm.
it's something that needs to be heard and repeated over and over until people understand. Please share why the denominator matters.
Sure, sure. So, ironically enough, like, when I talk to different people about hard money, right? So put Bitcoin aside for a second, whether it's gold or silver, I say, hey, would you want to own something that is constantly increasing, or would you want something that has a fixed supply? And taking it back to fractions, right? Like, I know for some people, they may get intimidated by math. And that's a whole nother conversation in terms of I feel like people get discouraged early to there's kids that like are really good at math. They just because you got one math problem wrong, you had a trouble in class, the teacher could be wrong. It may not be because there's something wrong with you. So I like to go back to fractions and I say, okay, I think a lot of people, especially after COVID, people obsess over their net worth and they're like, oh yeah, like I have more money, I have more dollars, I have more this. And it's like, okay, cool. But understand that's your numerator, right?
Yeah.
And when you have a fraction, and if you increase the numerator, or if you increase the denominator, excuse me, faster than your numerator is going up, like you're going to get the output is going to be lower and lower the value. So one
Hmm.
divided by two, one divided by 100, five divided by 1000, and then so on and so on. That denominator is the supply of dollars in the system.
Yes.
Kind of that example is what I like to use to individuals when I'm like, okay, ignore Bitcoin for a second. The fact that the fixed denominator is there. Think about anything in your life that you have that it's scarce. The value of it probably will go up because it's not just created into abundance. So I like to use that example. I'm like, hey, listen, if you're blessed to have 100,000, 50,000, 20,000, or $100 million, you can't run away from the fact that the denominator is always going to be increasing in a financial system, the fiat system that we all live in and operate in. So that's
Yes.
kind of why I put it on the shirt. And then shout outs to Renee. She actually designed it and drew it.
Nice.
And then I threw it on some shirts and stuff like that. And people have been buying them and loving it. So it's been a good way to an easy way to get the message out and not be like, hey, let me tell you about this thing called Bitcoin. Like I'm really
Yeah.
not trying to like scare anybody. But at the end of the day, it's the truth. So they understand the denominator. When I explain that example to them, they're like, hey, where can I buy this? So that's been
Yeah.
my kind of like orange pill methodology.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's really helpful actually, because I was curious myself, just understanding what that means. That's
Right.
a really great way to get the conversation started instead of saying, "Hey, Bitcoin."
Exactly, exactly. Yeah, like it's like at the end of the day, like I just try to bring it back to things that people that relate to them. That was essentially the whole story behind Sent Me Anyways, and why I started it was making finance simple, making complex simple, and redefine education through analogies. So Sean loves to use this example. I know you guys like talk like Anthony. Sean Danielle. I'm not sure if you've met Sean, one of our good friends, but Sean always uses the example of like a sports team, and I use sports as well to break through to people with explaining anything financial and stuff like that because I played sports. And I'm like, hey, at the end of the day, like they don't really say they're gonna come out with a bunch of NFL teams, new teams every year. Same thing with NBA. There's never like random expansion teams that just pop up. That's because the people that own the teams don't want the denominator to just grow fast. They want to retain the value of the team, of the valuation of the company, of the brand, of the product. So I try to use that example. That's another good example too, kind of bringing it to something that people can relate to sports. Some people, right? So, and people see it on TV, the Super Bowl, you can understand there's only a select amount of people that own an NFL team, and it will
Yeah.
always be that way. So,
Yeah.
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 No, that's really good. And then so speaking about the denominator, so do you think we're shifting towards a new denominator? What are your thoughts on this?
So honestly, like I listen to a bunch of people on YouTube and stuff like that, and I don't think that we're switching to a new denominator yet. I don't even know if we'll ever really truly switch to a new denominator, because if we do, the people who are really in control of the fiat system will lose their edge in terms of what they want to like do. So, but I do think that for the individuals at the sovereign level that understand that they can control their own denominator for themselves, like
Yeah.
we don't have to wait for anybody else to tell us that the math in front of us and what we're seeing with our eyes and we're feeling it like in our personal and lived experience is happening, right? So that's the thing that I think is super cool. I think for me, I'm like at a micro level, I can't change the world, but I could definitely, like what you all are doing right now with your podcast, you're changing the individuals around you to then be able to like collaborate with people and share the message. That actually will probably, that could supercharge the denominator changing and us seeing a shift. At the sovereign level, if all people are taking control and knowing that they can change their own denominator, that will be cool. But I think at the macro level, I think that there are probably countries clearly that are definitely like taking hard money seriously if they can within reason. I think that the countries that have less debt and are more sovereign, they will probably be able to have an edge in the new world shift that we see. But I don't know at what point we'll see it. I feel like unfortunately there'll have to be more pain for individuals at the individual level before they really realize that there's something structurally wrong. But at the same time too, there's people who are in Bitcoin that are more obsessed with they're more obsessed with freedom go down as a result of number go up, and they don't understand what they're even doing. So they're like, oh yeah, like anybody that's like institutions are of course going to buy Bitcoin. Like Michael Saylor is going to buy Bitcoin, but think about who they work for, right? Like think about who's the board, like who runs those companies. And I'm not even
Exactly.
saying that from being a conspiracy theorist. Like I worked in finance for a while, and I have
Mhm.
friends that still work in there, so that's how it works. And
Yes.
their objective is to literally make money for the shareholders. So
Yes.
if you're literally giving your time and energy away and working for your dollars and you're giving it to them to buy Bitcoin on your behalf, you could just buy it yourself. Doesn't mean that you don't buy the stock. I'm just saying, like, understand that as more Bitcoin gets centralized in other like institutions, there's like what is it? Like Rajat always says, like, oh, 1,000 more people can't get a whole coin today, or like don't even worry about a whole coin, a half a coin, a point one. It doesn't matter. Whatever you can accumulate. The point
Yes.
is that like people are cheering for number go up at the expense of freedom go down. And that's kind
Yes.
of what I'm trying to show. And then you can see it when the price goes down, like the institutions are going to dump it. They don't care. Like they
Yeah.
really don't care about it being like accessible to everybody, but you
Yeah.
can go buy it. You can just power up your own node. You can power up your own Strike app and just buy it yourself. So we'll see if it ever really moves that way. But I think at a macro level and at a geopolitical level, the people who are controlling and the institutions that really control the way in which things go, they would give away their entire power. I do think they want self-custody in Bitcoin for themselves though. So they'll
Yes.
tell people not to custody Bitcoin and like buy like the ETFs and wrappers and stuff. They want that for you And for everybody else, they want to tokenize the world for you to like get to fall down that psyop, but
Mhm.
they want self custody Bitcoin for themselves. It's kind of like having countries that are domiciled with favorable tax policies in islands, right? The Cayman Islands and stuff like that. They want that for themselves. They
Yeah.
don't want that for the average person. So it'll never
Yeah.
go away. I think the next story we'll see, it'll become a self-custody story more than anything else. Like what can you take with you or have that nobody can seize when there's another
And
print?
that is so good. And I just want to let me know if this makes any sense, if I'm leaning in the right direction. So just to kind of break it down for someone simpler who's
Mhm,
listening. So basically, like whenever you could take Bitcoin to yourself, you can take self custody from Bitcoin. You take it off exchanges and you keep it to yourself. You put it in cold storage, right? It's a
mhm,
very, very big deal.
mhm,
No one can take that away from you. And to kind of correlate it to what's going on right now, like, and let me know if I'm wrong with stocks, right? Like
mhm,
nobody owns stocks. Like it's a
mhm,
very small percentage of people of your everyday person who
mhm,
is investing in stocks, right? And it's almost like their little own casino that they can control and prop up. And so going back to institutions buying Bitcoin and self custody, it's almost like they're like next level stock market, right? Hey, only we can have access to this type of deal.
mhm.
Am I wrong on that, or is that,
No, no,
what are your
no.
thoughts?
You're definitely leaning in like the right direction. Like at the end of the day, for me, like I think about it like this. We were talking about it a little bit on Spaces last night, and I've been talking about it with some friends during the week. Like, there's nothing wrong with buying a stock if that's what you want to do. I always tell people like you can't really truly appreciate the solution until you understand the problem. So I never tell anybody like what to do. I may tell you what I'm doing, and I'll tell you what I know, and then eventually the hardest assets that you own will become the biggest thing that you own because of math.
Yes.
Nothing to do over time, it has literally nothing to do with emotions and what you thought in the past. It's just mathematically driven. It's by facts, right? So for me, right, like when I think about stocks, and to your point, you said like nobody really owns it. Like, yeah, like you're a beneficiary legally of the stock, but you technically don't own it because they lend it.
You're
So
right. You're
not
right.
even to go down the I could go like on and on about the rabbit hole as it pertains to it, but
Yep.
the moral of the story is the moment you sign the fine print on any brokerage, right? So
Yep.
Robinhood, Charles Schwab, anywhere, you're the beneficial owner of that share. However, that brokerage through like the DTCC, the Depository Trust and Clearing Corporation, they can lend the shares to anybody. Like they can
Yes.
lend the shares and they can make more shares than actually are issued and exist. It's like
Yeah.
the shadow market, right? So moral story, kind of think about that for anybody listening. It's like the black market of like stocks and just like investing, where you don't really know how much exists. I have no idea how many shares of Nvidia are actually issued because they're
Mhm.
lending them and they're creating them and they're selling what are called derivatives on those shares. And as a
Yes.
result, they're just lending it around. So you log into your app and you see, I have $10,000 worth of Apple, but it says it's there, but it's really not there. Kind of like your
Yeah.
money in the bank.
Yes.
So that's
Exactly.
another example, like, right? Like, it doesn't mean don't own shares if you want to.
Yes.
However, understand what true ownership in your own custody means.
Exactly.
They don't have to show proof of like anything of reserves or anything.
Overgrowth. Yeah.
Yeah, they don't.
No, that makes so much sense. Did you have a question, Danielle?
No, I not a question, but it made me think of loans too, like when you're buying a house. Like
Mhm.
Yes.
when he was, I mean, that's how the stock market crashed, you know? So
Mhm.
when he was doing loans, working in the loan industry, it was interesting because he was
Mhm.
like, I'm just loaning money that I don't even know if it's actually in the
Yeah. I
system.
used to
Like,
yeah.
you know what I mean? Like it was crazy. These people are just asking, especially in 2020 when it was
Mhm.
just a wild time. It was interesting because I was like, "Do they even have money to pay this back?" You know, like, I don't even
Right.
know how these people are gonna be paying off these loans that are were down to what was the percentage of interest? It was, like,
it was like low
really
threes,
low.
high twos. Uh,
Then, yeah, it goes up, and so that's what made me think when you were sharing that, you know, that's what I thought of immediately. I was like, "I don't know how this loan system is working because I don't even know if there's money in there."
yeah, there's no money. They just lend out more than what they have. And
Yeah.
if they for whatever reason, if they're like if there's an emergency, they'll just print all this money because there's no
Yes.
money that's existing. Really quick, just to pivot on this, I love this. Thing. That was a great question, Danielle. So the right now this week, we just passed $39 trillion in our national debt. A
Yeah.
lot of people don't even know we have a national debt. A lot of people don't even know you can go on US World Debt Clock and look at the
Mhm.
actual debt live.
Mhm.
We just hit $39 trillion.
Mhm.
Why is it important for people to understand this?
Yeah, no. So yeah, the debt that we see on what's reported is 39 trillion. And I always tell people like I'll have to send it to you all because maybe you could put it up on you could put it up on like one of your social media and stuff like that. And it's like this really big picture of an iceberg. And it shows the iceberg like it's 39 trillion or whatever the debt was like last year. And then below the iceberg is like this big, huge like structure, which is the iceberg is bigger than what you can see. You only see the tip of the iceberg, right? The 39 trillion of debt is really only the tip of the iceberg. That under what you don't see is off balance sheet debt, like unfunded liabilities, they will call it. And it's like in the quadrillions. It's huge. Like nobody knows, right? It's like a black hole. And in terms of the debt and where it is, right? The 39 trillion, sadly, it's just kind of robbing from future generations. Like everything that we're feeling now is because of what happened before. And I think the education and the resources that people see to be able to understand what this stuff means, they're probably more relevant because you can just Google, you can watch YouTube. However, I still think that a lot of people don't understand how that trickles into their daily lives. So, like for example, I remember like last year, this is actually really crazy, right? Like this is a story that I'm definitely fine with sharing to everybody here because it shows you how insane this is, right? Like I currently live like in Massachusetts, and I moved back to Massachusetts like 2 years ago. But for some reason, it was weird where like they were New York. I was living in New York before for school, and I was there for work, and I got like a check for like an inflation reduction check. So because where I was living before, like my little cousin is living where I was living before, like I got the check, but I'm not even in New York, right? And then to me, I'm like, well, they're giving it to me because of that. But I'm getting this inflation reduction check. And that inflation reduction check was like $200, but it was a stimulus check. Like,
Yeah.
and they were sending those checks out. And I remember seeing it. I have a ton of family in New York and they were talking about it. They're like, hey, we're getting these checks. And I'm like trying to tell them, like, hey, you're gonna pay for that through inflation, like actual real inflation years down the road. You're
Yeah.
seeing this money come to your bank account, or you're getting this check, just like the stimulus checks that everybody got in COVID. Like you're gonna pay for that. So I mean, I took my $200 check that they gave me and I just bought more Bitcoin. So at that point, like that's kind of what I did. And I told them, like, yeah, just go buy Bitcoin. Like I'm telling you the same thing I've been telling you for years. So to your point, like I don't really think the debt's gonna stop. I think it's gonna continue to grow. I think that, not to get super, super technical, but because the way in which the debt levels are growing and the rate, like kind of Anthony with your lived experience with work, like the treasury yields and all the yield that is essentially dictating what people feel personally, what credit card, mortgages, etc. They need that rate to go down because they
Yeah.
want to refinance the debt at a lower rate. But it's not cracking right now. Like the debt's not the yield's not cracking, it's going up. Right. And
Yeah.
that's a whole nother conversation. So I don't know. It is kind of daunting. It is scary to think about like over the past year and a half, how much it's grown. Obviously, unfortunately, we see all the geopolitical stuff with war and stuff going on and the printing that's happening there. And I just feel like they're gonna have to paper over it. They're gonna have to paper over it with more printing. And yeah, like it's like the people that have the hardest assets will be able to protect themselves from what's coming.
Yeah. Oh man, that is so good because people don't understand. Like you talk to your average Joe, right? And they're talking right
Mhm,
now, like man, and and I feel like most people don't talk about it enough. But like people are working multiple jobs now, right? They are
mhm,
like, and it's hard to keep up with your everyday expenses.
Yeah.
And so when
mhm,
people are working these multiple jobs, like going back to, years ago,
mhm,
one person could work a job and like take care of the whole entire family.
Yeah.
And so
mhm,
what happened? Like nothing real,
mhm,
like it was just more printing that was going on, inflation's going on. This was a slow path up to this where we're at now. So when people they'll regurgitate what they hear online or on TV and they'll just be like, oh yeah, like this is just normal, like things just go up. Like no, like literally things should be going down
Mhm.
because
mhm,
technology is deflationary and technology
mhm.
is going like like
Yes.
super quick. So everything actually naturally, and Jeff Booth puts this in his book, Price of Tomorrow, but everything should be going down because we are
Mhm,
able to produce mass production quicker, right? And goods and services quicker. And so everything should be going down, but everything's going up. And so
mhm,
going back to that, it's like But our system is built for everything to just keep going up. And so it's like,
Mhm,
man, where are we going to people like don't think in 5, 10 years from now, but because we're so like immersed in today, but we need to be thinking ahead. So we'll just use gas because it's so relevant right now, right?
mhm,
With
mhm,
everything going on with Iran and just everything in our economies. Gas is like, let's just say right here in Orange County, it's like 4.50. It's like $4, right?
yeah,
And so if it's right now in 2026, where do you think gas will be at in 2030? It's like and then I heard in Spaces last night, and Jami was talking about how $1 million back in like 20 years ago was considered a lot of money. Like a
mhm,
$1 million house was like, you would think growing up, like, dude, $1 million house was like,
mhm,
bam. And
mhm,
now $1 million house is like a regular like shack.
Shaq.
The goalposts are gonna keep moving, and I think it might have been Nolan. And I keep bringing up stuff from the Spaces, but it was so good. But he was talking about how like we're gonna be talking about how you got to be a billionaire to have like a great life, right? Because a millionaire,
mhm.
everyone's gonna be a millionaire. Nothing. It's not gonna be valuable at all. I don't know. I just think like a lot of things that were touched on and where we're at right now is really good though.
To your point, right, with what we were talking about spaces, I think is really relevant, right? I don't even know if you heard when I was sharing this example where I put up like I wanted to ask Grok and I posted it on Instagram and then I posted it on Twitter. And I was like, okay, from 2015 to 2026, I was like, Grok, can you show me the median price of a home from 2015 to 2026 and how much it increased? And then also illustrate how if you price that house from 2015 to 2026 in gold and Bitcoin, explain like kind of like the how it changed, like the price movements. So when you looked at the price of homes from 2015 to 2026, it increased like 38%. Right. So it was like 388,000 was like the median price across the country, obviously, because there's all these remote areas too. And then it shows that if you priced it in gold, it was about like, I think it was maybe like 300 ounces of gold because gold was about $1,100 in 2015. And then now it's about 4,500 right now. And it was now, if you priced it, it was like, it would take 84 ounces of gold to buy a home, right? And then if you priced it in Bitcoin, it was 652 Bitcoin in 2015. And now it's 6 Bitcoin. So literally, like when you start changing the denominator, right, to your point, and all this stuff, prices are falling like in these other like hard monies. And that's
Yes.
really what I try to really communicate. I'm like, to Nolan's point last night on the space, like literally if you save in dollars, the more we save in dollars for the things we really want in our lives, the more expensive things are going to go because they're just using that dollar to go create more debt. The moment you take your money out of the system in whatever capacity, if it's silver, gold, Bitcoin, nobody can take that from you. And I always think about it like this, like nobody's giving you something that they like consider worth something. Like if somebody
Yes.
gives you dollars for a stimulus, it's because they know they can make more. They're not saying, "Hey, here's some oil gas so you can have gas, like give people gas." Like they're not giving you gas or oil because they know it's a
Yeah.
commodity. Like they're not giving you gold, right? Like if you go work a job and you get shares for your like part of your compensation package, there's somebody that saved for MicroStrategy, they're stacking or Nvidia. And then there's a
Yes.
new engineer or a new marketing person that got maybe $100,000 worth of shares printed out of thin air for them, right? So
Yes.
when you start thinking about that, and I think some people, they don't really, I'm not faulting people because they may not know anybody that's in that field or industry. And I think like for all of us, we know a lot more than probably the average person. So we're trying to share those experiences. But it isn't like you're talking from just like hypotheticals. Like there could be somebody that gets a job out of college, works at a company, they get the shares that you're saving in that because they make them. Like they're getting it. They're printing the shares. They're issuing the shares to them, and then they're just
Exactly.
giving them to them, right? So it's kind of like it's really wild when you start thinking about that aspect of it. And then when you go back to the house example, right? Like, and then the whole everybody could be a millionaire. Like, yeah, like if you there's people in Massachusetts, like in Boston, certain areas. You would. I was just talking to my father about this. Houses like in a neighborhood where he grew up, not far from it. This neighborhood was very rough, right? It's changed, it's become more gentrified, but it was rough when he was growing up there. And they literally have houses for $2 million. $2 million. And,
Wow.
and, and they're not worth $2 million, right?
Yeah,
Oh,
So
right.
it's just mind blowing. Like at the end of the day, like a lot, like nobody could really afford that per se. They're just gonna get indebted and then things will there'll be a correction because there always is because it's
Yeah.
orchestrated. So
Yeah.
Yeah. When would you think there'd actually be a next correction? Because I think they don't want these correct. They just want to keep filling the
hmm
gap with more money and flooding the system with more money. So
hmm
like, because I always thought like around in 2020, I think there was going to be something before COVID. Like I was like, oh,
hmm
this is unreal. Like rates
hmm
are super low. And things were just I was like, "Nah, there needs to be a reset, a correction." And it already
hmm
had been and people don't know, but these corrections, they happen, like, in decades, right?
oh yeah.
And there haven't been one since the '08,
hmm
and you would think they'll learn their lesson, but they just kept going back to these old principles, right? Of, like
hmm
I think they're even doing, like, stated income again for, like, to get
hmm
housing and stuff. So it's just and that's what kinda got us in the '08.
yeah.
You know, people were
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
at a grocery store and they're like, "Hey, you got a job? You got a pulse?" And they're like, "Yeah." And I'm like, "Okay, here you go. You got to, you can get this."
yeah.
But they couldn't really afford that home, right? So,
Yeah.
uh, with speaking on that, like, do you think that what kind of correction do you see? Do you think there's like a time frame? Like, what does that look like?
Mhm. So honestly, like I feel like we've already seen I feel like the warning signs have been like kind of flashing before our eyes as it pertains to the macro situation. So I'll give an example. Like a lot of people obviously talk about '08 because it was just super, super like domino effect across the world. People talk about 2020 with COVID, obviously. But what a lot of people don't talk about, I feel like post COVID, in between like COVID and now, they don't mention like Silicon Valley Bank or First Republic and the regional bank crisis. And a lot of people kind of like gloss over that. And I remember back when that happened, like I was writing about that sent me on blogs, on newsletters and stuff. I've been sharing insight about that. One, because I had some friends that worked at First Republic on the private wealth management side, and they lost their job. And talking to him about his experience, and then he's good. Like he got pretty much got a job like a week later at another bank doing what he does. But the point is like the regional bank crisis stuff was serious.
Yes.
I have another friend, who works at a hedge fund that he runs with his family, and the hedge fund invests in banking companies, banking stocks. So even understanding kind of like that piece, because a lot of the stocks that they're buying will be maybe regional banks or community banks or commercial banks, and they're buying stocks in those. And when I'm understanding what he's saying about the inner workings of the smaller banks, that's what keeps like the economy going. Right? People think about the big, huge banks, but at the local level, a lot of people use their local regional community banks. What I think was very interesting about the Silicon Valley Bank situation is that there were a bunch of affluent people that bank with Silicon Valley Bank,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
I had a conversation with a friend of mine literally like a month, 2 months ago that has a company, a startup he runs, and they're doing great. And they banked with Silicon Valley Bank, and he was scared out of his mind. Like a
Yeah.
lot of his like personal finance and stuff was like banking through Silicon Valley Bank, but they papered over it. They printed it. Like there were a lot of affluent people that were hopping in spaces on Twitter. I listened to at the time I was listening to like the All In podcast. They were like telling people, "Hey, put your money on a Silicon Bank," because it's not even they're not hiding the fact that there's a crack in the system. But
Yep.
those individuals that are banking there, they're not going to lose their money, right? Like they got covered, right?
Yes.
So I say all that to say, like in terms of the next crash, I don't even know where it is. I feel like there's all these like crashes that are happening before our eyes and they're papering
Yes.
over them.
Yeah.
You see it with private credit right now. Like there's all these private credit companies or funds, excuse me, that are like somewhat insolvent because of the valuations and all the money that was raised during COVID. So it works when rates are high or low, excuse me, when rates are lower and they're starting to trickle up, alternative lending facilities make sense. Some companies may say we're going to get money from a private credit fund. So for those that may be listening, like just to explain what private credit funds are and why it's relevant, like
Yes.
private credit is like private debt. So imagine like a big company, financial company like Bain Capital. I'm not sure if people may know about Bain, but Bain like is a private equity company that buys businesses, and they'll buy businesses that are private, or they'll take a company private hypothetically, but for the most part they buy private companies, and they will essentially put in their own leadership and they'll make the company better, more efficient, and then their goal is to sell the company for more than they bought it for. But the
Mhm.
only way that they're able to finance that too is by borrowing money. They get debt. They borrow money at like low interest rates from banks to then buy companies, fix them up, lay people off, and then sell them, and then their investors make a bunch of money. So what happened was there was a trend where a lot of these people in private markets realized, hey, we have our own private equity fund. Why don't we start a private credit fund, debt, like a debt fund, and we can raise money from wealthy investors for people, and then we can lend that money to our portfolio companies because they need lending facilities. So that essentially has been growing and becoming it became more popularized in over the like past like decade or so. And then what also happened was they made those funds available to retail investors through like you could like I could go on my Robinhood or I could go on Schwab. You can go on any investment and invest in these types of vehicles. But what happens is in a situation like now when there's a lot of instability, insolvency, right? Like a lot of the cracks in the financial system, some of those companies were not able to give all the redemptions at once to those investors. So there were a
Yeah,
lot of reports about BlackRock, one of theirs, they were halting redemptions.
it's crazy.
Um, First
It's
Brands, yeah, there's a lot. Blue Owl, there's a
it's
lot.
it's
Yeah.
crazy. And but no, again, we're never taught this. It's really
Mm-mm,
wild. We're just taught the basics. You'll go to a job, right? And I just started my new job at Tesla. And then they're like, hey, and as your onboarding process, you should really invest in your 401k and
mm,
here's a bunch of Tesla shares. And it's like, again, diluted. They could just issue those shares. And then also 401k. Most people, if you talk to someone and you're like, what vehicles is your 401k putting into? Like what Goldman
mm,
Sachs, like index, like what are
mm,
your the money you're just pouring into every 2 weeks,
mm,
Yeah.
and you don't even know where that money's going, and they're investing that money, right? And so you're just like you're almost like hoping, living on a prayer that by 60 or 65, like, I'm gonna have enough money to retire, and back then, that worked
Right.
because the dollar wasn't bleeding as much, right? It held a little bit
mm,
more value back then,
mm,
and, but now it's just like when you pivot and you like learn this stuff and you're reading and you're doing the work and you're just like,
mm.
whoa, like how does this exist?
Like Sean did a great breakdown on like the historical context of like that transition from the pension being the thing to the 401k being the thing. Like I
Yes.
said,
Yeah.
I'm not even telling anybody not to do their 401k if they don't want, because one, I think the more you understand the different options that are available and you're using them to know why, you'll
Yeah.
realize why the off ramps are so powerful. So that's
Yeah.
why I encourage people like contribute to whatever you want. But the moment you understand why you're doing it and what it is, you may look at that differently. For me, that to your point, like that's kind of what happened to me early on. Like I would ask a ton of questions. Like
Yeah.
not and luckily for me, like I had people around me, like my family, my parents, like they shared a lot of this stuff with me. Things that they did like very well and things that they're like, oh, I wish I did this a little different. So they were more educated in some of that stuff with financial literacy. And I had an uncle who was the one that taught a bunch of people. Like he was like the first one that really told everybody. So
Yeah.
that's kind of how it got trickled down to me. But I think, and my sister, but I think from the perspective of what you're saying with the 401k, like if you don't, what I always understood, and this is really what I talk about all the time, and I'll die on this hill. I remember back when it was probably, I mean, 5 years ago or so, maybe like six, going to NYU for business school and even going to Villanova and doing finance and stuff. Like I have people and friends that work in finance and they invest in startups. They may work in private equity, the type of companies you mentioned, they work in investment banking. And the one thing that stood out to me always was like when someone says to you, hey, like, you can't invest in this investment because you don't have enough net worth. Like your net worth isn't high enough to get access to like this good stuff. But like they'll funnel you to the other stuff, right? And
Yeah.
when you start thinking about those gates and those barriers to entry, and then you think about the 401k component, right? The wealthiest people, they're not just using the 401k to get like out of the system in a different way. They're buying other hard assets and they're buying businesses or they're investing in people that are buying those businesses. And what I realized too, like through that experience was like, okay, well, all of a sudden, like Robinhood and all these companies say, we're trying to democratize finance and investing by offering you access to private shares of like Anthropic before it goes public in Anduril. And I'm like, listen, like nobody, I promise you, nobody's doing that because they care. The secondary market for like private companies for people who want to invest in them, that's been around for a long time. Like there are people who literally will raise money from athletes and really, really celebrities, Ashton Kutcher and people, and say, hey, do you want to invest in SpaceX? That's how they got it, because there was an early employee that probably wanted a liquidity event, and then they're willing to come in and buy it now because they have a bunch of money. Like that's how that works. By the time it gets to you and Robinhood is saying that they're going to give you private investing in your thing, they're dumping the bull crap on you. Like they're not giving you the good stuff. And that's kind of what bothers me. And I get really passionate about it when I try to explain to people, because I'm like, nobody's giving you this like private investment to help you. They're dumping it on you. And to bring it back home to the 401k point, you know, one of the key things that the administration mentioned, and this is even like a politically charged statement, this is facts, right? Like I remember when I think it was like at the beginning of the big beautiful bill and a lot of stuff, a lot of the lobbies, think about it, like if it was the tech lobby, the financial lobby, the military lobby, which gave a lot of money to the administration, even when you think about the banking lobby, when they were essentially writing up writing up some of the amendments as it pertained to investments that people can access in their 401ks, retail investors, they are now saying, hey, how do we get private credit? How do we get private equity? How do we get VC funds into people's like 401ks? So now you're like, well, yo, I can go buy these private investments. I can get a seat at the table at what the big guys have. And that's how they're marketing it. They're marketing it because they want to dump that stuff on you. Like you are the liquidity for the individuals that have the stale stuff. And if that goes through, oh, well, that already obviously is going through. Like that's been like formalized where now people can invest in that stuff. Those are the types of questions you need to ask when you invest in your 401k. Anybody listening, like just think about like the stuff that they're throwing in there that people don't want. They want to unlock that trillions and trillions of dollars of just passive money that people who, you know, we're in our 30s or whatever. If we just keep investing for another 30 years in our 401k, how much money are they getting from us? And then think about everybody around you that's just doing it blindly. You don't even know what they're dumping into there. And it becomes like a big black hole. And that's kind of what I try to say. Like, do it if you want. You should do it, because the more you do that and you DCA into hard money, you will understand why you want the hard money and you want more of it. But that's a key component from the structural foundational aspects of how these vehicles work that I try to communicate in a way that is understandable, and not to go too high level, but just understand it's like someone throwing a bunch of stuff in a crock pot, and they had a bunch of stuff in their like pantry, and they just threw everything in there at once so it didn't go to waste. And they're like, here, serve it up, like this is for you. So
you're like, where this came from XYZ? All right.
Yeah, okay, like great. Like you're just serving me up this like concoction. Great.
Thank you. This is such a nice kitchen.
So
It's all junk in there.
Oh my god.
The pot.
Yeah. So how should people then like protect themselves from kind of this environment? You know, what are ways? I mean, I'm thinking, you know, me just educating themselves, you know, with the basics of finance. I think that's like a place to start. But yeah, if you could add on to that, what are you thinking?
So it's actually great. I'm glad you asked that question, Danielle. Like, so I'll give an example about one of the things we're doing right now, because it's super relevant to how people can start. Because I don't even think it doesn't have an age limit. So we do work with my team. We do work with some community centers and some churches that have community centers like in the area. So we're on week 3 teaching a group of middle schoolers about freedom literacy. I don't like to call it financial literacy. I like to call it freedom literacy, and teaching them about savings, budgeting, investing. But the way we started with them, we always start with the budget. Like literally, we always start with the budget and explain it to them. And I think what's very interesting is, you know, these young kids, like they're like 12 to like maybe 13, and they don't really know much about money or investing like that. But the way they're like retaining stuff so quickly and starting from the foundational aspects, I think that's super important, especially when it comes to budgeting, right? Because even from the work we're doing with the children, all the way up to adults that we work with too, through our community or our course or our program coaching, whatever it is, like I always start with that. And everybody on my team will say the same thing, is understanding what's coming in and what's going out. The reason being is because we're living in an environment where if you don't have a real good pulse on that, you're gonna just overspend naturally. So that's where I like to start. And then secondly, within there, like if you take anything away from what I'm saying, is understanding how debt is just a hindrance, right? So there's some debt, obviously, like if you have a house and you had a good mortgage or whatever, like God bless you. Or if you went to school and you had some student loans and that allowed you to get a job, right? That's like a debt where you could pay that debt down, pay it off, but at least you use your education to get a job to educate yourself. Now the bad debt, like the credit card debts that may be getting out of control, or car debt, buying a car that you can't afford, I've been encouraging everybody to get rid of that stuff. I feel
Yes.
like it's hard for me to have a conversation with them about investing in Bitcoin and stuff until I really make sure that they understand why the debt is the problem. Because by the time they understand that the debt that they have incurred is printed, then they
Yeah.
really are motivated to get rid of that debt to
Yes.
buy more Bitcoin. So that's
Yes.
kind of been my approach lately. Like I'm like, hey, well, for years, I'm like, hey, you got credit card debt? Yo, don't get upset that you have credit card debt. Pay it down, like, if you could consolidate some of the cards, consolidate the cards, and then get rid of the debt. Why pay the credit card company interest for money they create out of thin air with your time
That's
and energy? That's
so
money
good.
that can be reallocated to the hard money. So
So good.
that's kind of like a good starting point for me where I've been going, like the budgeting and then eliminating that consumer debt. Once they get that, I'm like, understand how that debt you're incurring and what you're paying. They're giving you 30 to 40% interest, 20 to 30% a year. And for me, right, like I mean, I know Anthony, like we talk about faith and stuff like that as well. Like I'm a man of God, right? And for me, usury is a sin. And everybody knows that, and it's permeated into the society where people are accepting usury, and it's hindering people, it's controlling them. So that's why I'm like, the moment you can like break free of that high
Yes.
usury debt, like
Yes.
you will feel that is the weight that's lifted off of a bunch of people's back. And then from there, to your question, Danielle, then we can really start running forward. Doesn't mean that you can't do the investments at the same time, but you won't appreciate it. I don't want you to ever get back in that position ever again.
Exactly.
So
That's so good. That is so good, Jordan,
okay.
because people don't know, like, having that debt, especially student loans debt, like, you're buried in it at a young age. It's crazy, like, you can just get into this debt, but, like, you can't buy a car, or you can't own a car, or, like, you can't even drink a beer, but you can get into hundreds and thousands of
Yeah.
dollars in debt, like,
Easy, easy.
what are we talking about? And people understand too, like, if you're listening, like, debt is like you have no money. When you pay off your debt, you're basically broke,
Broke.
right?
Yeah.
You're broke,
Hmm.
right? And then
Hmm.
whatever money you have and you pour it into hard assets, now we're like winning,
Hmm.
right? Like that's
Hmm.
where you're really growing, because I'm glad I found this out after, right? But when
Hmm.
you have debt and you're
Hmm.
paying this debt and people are making money off of you that they
Hmm.
just printed out of thin air, Jack Mahler says it the best. Nobody should have to work for money that another man can print.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
that is like I was like, "Oh my gosh," like, and then I almost like get in this other mindset where like, maybe I just take out this debt and just buy Bitcoin with this hard money.
Yeah,
Let me
no,
like really stick it to them.
no, but it's real. It's real. Like some people do that, and like for me, I'm like, you know, I always go back to what you said with the debt is like start pricing your life in hard money. Literally,
Yes.
like start pricing. I wrote a blog about that on the Sent Me Says newsletter, and I was like, start like literally kind of goes back to changing the denominator. Change the denominator on everything around you. And
Yes.
you'll quickly realize that you probably don't have enough hard money because you think that you had to collect dollars that are just melting. Doesn't mean you don't have dollars for your bills. You should have like emergencies. You should have some money allocated to the side so you can continue to accumulate and be smart with your strategy. And if you have children, you know what I mean? Like taking care of your family, like 100%. But I think that, I think hard money, because it's grounded in something that's not debased and controlled by it's not controlled the same way as printed dollars. It'll start to bring out the better in you to add more value, right?
Yeah.
You become more productive, right? You want to essentially work harder or work smarter, excuse me, and be able to save. You stop spending money on things that you thought you needed.
Yep.
Doesn't mean you don't go on vacation. You should go on a vacation, have abundance for your life, but understand that like if you can't delay gratification, like legitimately, you're gonna go right back to the same spot that you started. So to your point, like, yeah, change the denominator. Even if you do have debt, for anybody that's listening that has some debt, like change the denominator to how you're prioritizing the hard money and keeping like, living below your means and investing in other assets. And then like making sure that like that's starting to like take over and grow faster. Because the debt that you have whether it's like a mortgage, a student loan, is going to get inflated away. Like there's another person signing papers right now every
Yeah.
moment to get another debt. So it
Yeah.
doesn't mean that your debt's not that you shouldn't pay off your debt, right? And get there. But when you start thinking in hard money and changing the denominator of everything around you, you're like to the house example. If you knew that buying a house was 652 Bitcoin and now it's six, or it was a couple hundred gold ounces and now it's 84, but the dollar it keeps going up, why wouldn't I want to save the hardest thing? I start changing the denominator. I'm working and going to job. I'm working two jobs. Hypothetically, say you're working two jobs and you're doing Uber. Like Lindsay, shout outs to Lindsay. She's driving Uber to go stack more Bitcoin. Like
Yeah.
she's not going to drive Uber to like go spend it on extraneous
Dude.
stuff. Yeah,
Yeah.
shoes and dumb stuff, right? So once you change the denominator, for me, I see the world so much different. I'm like,
So
okay, yeah, like I'm literally like denominating my life in hard money.
yeah.
And if I'm the biggest beneficiary of it, awesome, me and Renee, our children, this is for them, right? Like this is for the legacy. So at the end of the day, like I'm not really in this to just like say, look at me, like I have this big portfolio. I'm like, I'm actually trying to help people, as are you all. So that's
Yeah.
really what it's about for
No,
me.
Yeah.
that is so good. And I think there's a quote out there too. Someone's debt is another man's asset. So your
Yes.
debt that you're
Yeah.
paying, someone else is making so much money off of you. And I'm like, I don't want
Oh
no one
yeah.
making any money off of me and my
Yeah.
family.
No.
The only thing that's making money is like our money. Our hard money is just making money for us. And all we're doing, and then you're just in your world, right?
Mhm.
Of like, how am I like leveling up, eating healthier,
Yes.
hitting the weights, being a better dad, being a better husband, and then you're like, oh, and then at the same time, your money is growing with you,
Yeah.
and you're
Right.
just in this world of like growing abundance and just getting better as a human being, and no one's making money off of you, no one can like come after you, no one's sending you a bill, and none of that stuff,
Right.
but we live in such a world where everyone's like, debt is so natural, it's so organic, it's like in our everyday, it's like in our
Mhm.
lives, and so
Yeah.
people think, oh, like I gotta have it, I gotta have this car, I gotta have the
Oh yeah.
like, you don't need any of that stuff.
Yeah.
All you
We,
need is eat right and do the right things. What'd you say?
Mia, you know it's crazy, and just to jump in with what you said about it being permeated throughout life. When I was talking to me and my team member Tom, we were talking to the kids on Tuesday, and we were talking to them about debt. And we were on investing week, but we were talking to them about like buy now, pay later. And they understood what credit cards are, but I asked them, I was like, hey, have you guys heard of buy now, pay later? And they were like, yeah, like and it's scary to me that they know what that is, right?
Yes.
They weren't saying that they were using it, but they know people that have used it. And then they're like, I was explaining to them that like what you're saying, like it trickles in. I remember, we're all like in the same generation. We wouldn't just go if we didn't have the money to buy something, we just weren't
Yeah.
getting
No.
it, right? Like
Yeah.
I didn't have a phone, like I had a flip phone maybe to make two calls by my mom and my dad and maybe my grandma's, and that was it. I couldn't call anybody else. So
Yeah.
at the end of the day, like the fact that they know what that is and they could have access to it and get a little loan to go buy a Chipotle burrito, like it's so abundant around you. And that's
Yeah.
what's wild to me. Like
Yes.
Yeah.
they're securitizing it, Danielle, to your point, like with the mortgages and just giving them to anybody. They're giving they'll give you debt to go buy Taylor Swift tickets and then
Yeah.
package them up and then sell the debt to an investor for a yield, right? To your point, Anthony, like they're making money off of you having to pay that debt forever. So now they're just kind of getting lower and lower and lower into these other areas that they can like kind of get these like shorter loans
Yep.
and charge higher interest. And it's really crazy. And they're banking on you not paying it off, right?
Oh
Yeah.
yeah.
They're banking on you. Like just keep paying, and and then
Yeah.
you're just in their pocket, while you're just keep paying. You're like, and then you're trading your most precious time, your most precious commodity, your time, for a dollar that's being diluted, and then also someone's making money off of that, your
Yeah.
time, and it's just
Mm-hmm.
when you really learn about Bitcoin, it teaches you so much of it. Just like removes the blinders, it removes the curtains, and you're just like, whoa, there's like this whole other world where like we can actually like live abundance,
Mm.
right?
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
And and those like values pop up, and
Mhm.
right, and so it's
Yeah.
really insane how you really think about it. Yeah, but everyone's like watching the headlines, watching the news, the number go up. Hey, Bitcoin's this,
Oh,
Bitcoin
yeah.
like that. None of that really matters once you understand what Bitcoin brings to you and your family and where it's going in the future. So if
Mm-hmm.
someone's listening right now feels behind or confused about all of this, like what's the first step they should take to start thinking differently and setting themselves
Mm-hmm.
up for protecting themselves?
Yeah, so I think for me, what I would recommend for like a YouTube video, I would start with this one animation that's super dope. I can't remember the guy's name. It's like Joe something. But if you search "what's the problem," like
Okay.
on YouTube, it's like an animated video and it starts to explain about the problem within the system. He doesn't even talk about Bitcoin until like the end, and it's animated and it's really good. I love that
Okay.
video. I think that's
Okay.
a great video to start. The Hidden Secrets of Money, maybe some of your other guests have mentioned Hidden Secrets of Money. That's an incredible book, like in terms of being able to understand like what the problem is. And once again, like that video isn't just about, it's not about Bitcoin until like the last like video, maybe. Like it's just talking about the history of money. I think that's a great one. Um, if you really want to go down the rabbit hole to truly understand what's going on, The Creature of Jekyll Island is a really, really like crazy book. It's dense, but it's a great book because it's talking about the history of the Fed, and that's where all this stuff is stemming from with the banking system and the Fed. I think if you were kind of trying to get through the book and if you want to get the book, cool. But if you also want to start off with the video, like the guy that wrote the book has an old school video on YouTube. If you literally search it, like, and I'll
Mhm.
send it to you guys and maybe put in the show
Yeah.
notes. Like that's a great video to understand that the Creature Jekyll Island and the whole financial system and how it works. And then honestly, check out SentMe, right? Like go to sentme.com. Like we have a lot of resources where we break this stuff down. I always try to make sure that in addition to explaining Bitcoin stuff, I'm explaining stocks and stuff as well, but I'm also just telling you the truth. So at the end of the day,
Yes.
you pick your poison. You can understand, you can literally watch a blog, listen to a blog that we're explaining about stocks, but I promise you, the more you go down the hard money rabbit hole, like you'll realize that that's totally different. Some things make sense in hard money world that don't make sense in fiat world because they're two different systems, right? So, two different worlds, exactly. So I think between those resources, and of course, anybody can always reach out to me directly on Twitter. Like my Twitter is Perry the PM, and on Sent Me is my social media. Like wherever we're on LinkedIn too. So for those that like are big into LinkedIn, I know people like to laugh at LinkedIn. LinkedIn's is a great platform.
Yeah.
I love LinkedIn.
With LinkedIn.
So yeah, it's LinkedIn, right? We're on LinkedIn, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, everywhere. So, like I said, I appreciate you all for just allowing me to be able to speak, and I love what you all are building.
Yeah, man, this has been so eye-opening for me. This was such a good conversation for sure. And just because I have a, history in education and all of that
Hmm.
too, just being with the younger kids and building those foundational,
Mhm.
insights of delaying gratification
Hmm.
and really thinking about not everything needs to be instant. You don't have to
Hmm.
keep up with the Joneses because the Joneses are in debt too.
Yeah.
Like just being able to instill those things in them at a younger age is super cool. And I like,
Hmm.
it's just very important. And we try to do that with our own kids, being
Hmm.
even just little things. It doesn't even have to be about finance. It could be like, hey, it's going to take hard work to get to where you want to go.
Hmm.
So we have to
Hmm.
delay that gratification sometimes to get those results, And
Hmm.
so I
Hmm.
think it's just so awesome. And even working with adults, we're still learning this whole fiat system too. It's like we're
Yeah.
always growing up, we're always learning something new, and just being
Hmm.
open minded enough to listen it's just super helpful. So I appreciate you and your time that you took
Yeah.
today, this morning, to share with our viewers and selfishly me, to learn a little bit more.
Yeah.
Awesome. Now, thank you all.
Dude, thank you, Jordan. We really appreciate this, man. I was super fired up to get you on here. I just always been, when I follow you, it's just like everything is like bam, bam, bam. Like I love
Yeah.
it. It's just like straight to the point. There's no
Yes.
there's no fluff. And I was just really like, and I know we can literally go on forever.
Hmm.
Because it's endless. These rabbit holes you go down, whether it's health, whether it's fitness, whether it's money, whether it's
Hmm.
education, like it's
Hmm.
it trickles into everything, like you
Everything.
said. And
Hmm.
so thank you again for carving some time out. We really appreciate it
Yeah.
and super excited.
Yeah. We'll have to
Yeah.
have
No.
Renee on.
Absolutely, she would love it. She would love it. And the one thing I'll just say too is like for anybody listening, like it doesn't even matter like what you start with. I remember the first stock that I ever bought personally, like in terms of taking it on myself to buy a stock, and I was an intern in working in finance during my sophomore year of college. I just finished my sophomore year of college. I was working in Boston at this finance company, and my one of my good friends was like, he was younger than me. He got the internship through networking. He had just graduated high school. We went to the same high school and middle school, and he got the job. My good friend Joe, and I always tell him this. And Joe literally was like, "Yo, I worked at a fish market for like all of our. I didn't even know he worked at the fish market, and he
Yeah.
saved up $10,000, like
Yeah.
at working at the fish market, and that was his first amount of money that he invested, and he kept doing it. And then he sent me the link to sign up for Scott Trade, and I had a couple $100, and I bought this company called Cooper Tire, and it ended up being a good company. It got acquired by Goodyear. But the point I'm just trying to make is that like the idea of just starting, it was never about like, look, Joe has more money than me. Like Joe's one of my close friends. Like we're boys to this day, and I respected him, and I actually looked up to the fact that he took that on himself to work in high school at the fish market. Right, like
Yeah.
I didn't have a job in high school working at or anything like that. Like I didn't have a job. I was working on. I was playing sports. I was doing other stuff. But the point is that like surrounding yourself with people that actually want the best for you, and that you also can look up to, and that you admire and respect. And at the end of the day, not comparing your chapter 1 to someone else's
Right.
chapter 10. Like
Yeah.
I didn't think, oh my gosh, Joe has more money than me. I'm like, I'm starting with what I can afford and what I have. And I never looked back from that point. And then that
Okay.
started with me explaining this stuff on platforms to other people. So don't be afraid of just starting with what you have. I know everybody's like, oh, get to this amount of Bitcoin, get to this amount of net worth. Literally just put your head down, surround yourself with good people, trust God, keep God first at it all, because God could take
Yes.
all of that away from you. Like I don't give a
Yeah.
crap how much Bitcoin you have. Like it doesn't matter at the end of the day. You can't take it with you. So like just be a good person, because the
Yeah.
system that we live in is trained to make people think they have to rush to get more. Like live in the moment, be present, and just be a good steward of what you're blessed with. And then
Yes.
I believe you would be blessed more abundantly for that.
Yeah.
So that's all I'll
Yeah.
leave it with. Yeah.
Let's go. Hey, that was great. I'm so pumped. Thank you. I'm leaving now and I'm all pumped up now. Do I
I'm glad.
Yeah, I'll have a pumped up Saturday.
Dude,
That's
thank you,
it.
Jordan.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This is
Appreciate
awesome.
it.